I still remember the sound of her crying. It wasn't loud. It wasn't the kind of crying that begged for attention. It was quiet, like the kind that comes from a place too deep to be seen. Every night, after she thought everyone had gone to bed, I'd hear it through the thin walls of our old house, the soft rhythm of her sobs blending with the sound of the ticking clock. At the time, I didn't understand. I was younger then, proud, impatient, and convinced that she cried because she wanted pity. I used to roll my eyes, pull my blanket over my head and think, why does she always make herself look so weak? Back then, I thought strength meant silence. I thought real people didn't cry. And I thought my mother, the woman who raised me, who smiled even when she was hurting, was just being dramatic. Years passed. Life happened. And I became a man with my own responsibilities, my own home, and eventually, my own silence. It wasn't until years later, after I lost almost everything that made me feel secure, that I began to hear that same quiet crying again. But this time, it wasn't hers. It was mine. That's when I realized I never really knew her pain. I never understood the weight she carried, or why she cried when the world slept, until one night, when life brought me to the same place she once stood. I grew up in a small house, nothing fancy, but it held the kind of warmth that money can't buy. My mother was the center of it all. She wasn't a loud woman. She never demanded attention, never raised her voice, but everything she did carried meaning, quiet, steady, and full of love that didn't need to be spoken out loud. I remember the way she used to wake up before sunrise, the faint smell of tea drifting through the hall. She'd hum old songs while she worked in the kitchen, the kind of songs that made the morning feel soft and safe. When I was a boy, I thought that was normal, that every home began its day with warmth like that. My father passed away when I was around 13. I remember the day so clearly, though I tried for years to forget. He had been sick for a while, but I never thought he'd actually go. When he did, I saw something break in my mother's eyes, but she didn't collapse. She just carried on, quieter, slower, but still standing. She took on small jobs, sewing clothes for neighbors, helping people around town. Every little thing she earned she spent on me, my school books, my shoes, the food on our table. Sometimes I'd catch her skipping her own meals just to make sure I had enough. When I'd ask if she'd eaten, she'd smile and say, "I'm not hungry right now, love. You eat." I believed her back then. I didn't see that smile for what it really was, a disguise for hunger, exhaustion, and endless sacrifice. As I grew older, I started to change. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was just the foolishness of youth. But I began to see her as someone who didn't understand the world. She'd still try to advise me, to remind me to be kind, to save money, to think before speaking. And I started to push her away. I remember one evening when she tried to talk to me about my friends. She said gently, "Be careful who you trust, son. Not everyone who smiles at you means well." I snapped back, "Mom, please. You don't know them. Times are different now. You always think the worst of people." The way her face fell still haunts me. She didn't argue. She just nodded and went back to folding clothes. That was her way. She never shouted, never fought back, just folded pain neatly and put it away where no one could see it. When I turned 18, I left home to study in another city. I told her it was for my future, and it was true. But deep down, I was also running away. I wanted freedom. I wanted a life where I didn't have to see her tired hands and quiet eyes reminding me of what I owed. She came with me to the bus station that morning. It was early, the sky still pale. She stood beside my bag, holding a small box of food she'd packed. I remember her saying softly, "Call me when you reach, okay?" I said I would, but when I got there, I didn't. Days passed before I thought of calling her. And when I finally did, she sounded so happy just to hear my voice. "You sound tired, Mom," I said. She laughed quietly. "A little. I don't sleep much these days." I didn't ask why. I didn't want to know. Life moved fast after that. I studied, made new friends, got a decent job. I told myself I was building a future she'd be proud of. But the more I succeeded, the less I called. Every time she tried to talk for long, I'd say, "Mom, I'm busy. I'll call you later." And later never came. Years went by. I got married to a woman I met at work. She was kind and confident. Everything I thought I needed in life. My mother couldn't travel for the wedding because she was unwell, and I told myself it was fine. I didn't want the hassle. She sent me a letter that day, a simple one, written in her shaky handwriting. It said, "I'm so proud of you. Take care of her the way you used to take care of me when you were little." I read it once and then put it away in a drawer. I didn't realize how much that letter meant, not until much later. After marriage, my life changed. We moved into a small apartment, both of us busy with work. Calls to my mother became shorter and less frequent. Sometimes she'd say, "I miss hearing your voice," and I'd laugh it off. "Mom, you're so emotional." "I'm fine. You should enjoy your time too." She'd say, "I do. Don't worry about me." And yet, her voice always trembled slightly at the end of those calls. One night, my wife said something that stayed with me for years. "You never talk about your mom much. Don't you miss her?" I shrugged. "She's fine. She's always been strong." She looked at me quietly and said, "Sometimes strong people are the loneliest." I brushed it off, but deep down, I knew she was right. I just didn't want to face it. Months turned into years. My mother grew older, her health weaker. I sent her money now and then, thinking that was enough, that money could replace presence. She'd still tell me stories when I called, about the neighbors, the little garden she tried to keep alive, the sparrows that nested near the window. I'd listen half-heartedly, scrolling through my phone, but she never complained. Not once. Not even when she started spending her nights alone, in that small, quiet house where I grew up. Looking back now, I see how lonely she must have felt. How many nights she must have cried silently, trying not to disturb the walls that once echoed with laughter. I think of those nights now and wonder, what was she thinking about? Was she remembering the boy who used to sit by her side and tell her about his dreams? Or was she wondering when that boy stopped calling her mom with warmth in his voice? Sometimes I replay those memories like an old film in my mind. The soft sound of her sewing machine late at night. The way she'd look at the door every evening when I was out late, pretending to tidy up, but really just waiting to hear my footsteps. The way she'd whisper prayers under her breath when I got angry or upset. At the time, I thought all of it was just her being overprotective. Now I know. It was love trying to hold on while it still could. Life has a strange way of teaching you what you refuse to learn. It waits until you're older, until you've made the same mistakes, and then it mirrors your own actions back to you. That mirror hurts, but it's honest. When I became a father myself, I thought I finally understood her sacrifices, but I was wrong. I understood responsibility, not her pain. That came later. That came when I too began to feel invisible in my own home, when silence became my only companion. But I'll get to that soon. For now, all I can say is that during those years, those long, selfish years, I thought she was fine. I thought she didn't need me, and maybe that's what broke her heart the most. Not that I went away, but that I stopped noticing she was still waiting. I don't remember exactly when the distance between my mother and me became permanent. Maybe it wasn't one moment. Maybe it was a series of small silences, tiny decisions and words left unsaid. That's how most relationships fade, not with shouting or big endings, but with long pauses that no one fills. There was a time when she used to call me every few days. At first, I'd answer quickly, my tone light but distracted. Later, I began to let the phone ring out. I told myself I was busy. Meetings, deadlines, errands, all those excuses that sound responsible, but are really just avoidance in disguise. Sometimes she'd leave a message. "Hi, son. Just wanted to hear your voice. Hope you're eating well." Her voice was always soft, careful, almost as if she was afraid of being a burden. I'd listen to those messages days later, feeling a brief sting of guilt. But instead of calling back, I'd tell myself, I'll call her tomorrow. Tomorrow turned into next week. Next week turned into months. Then one evening, she stopped calling altogether, I didn't notice at first. Life was noisy. Work, bills, friends, small arguments at home, constant distractions. There was no space left for silence. But one night, I opened my phone gallery by mistake and found an old picture of her. She was smiling, sitting in the garden behind our house, sunlight falling gently on her face. I stared at that picture for a long time. Something in her smile looked different, almost tired. I told myself I'd visit her soon. Maybe next month. Maybe after that promotion I'd been working toward. I even marked it on my calendar. But as always, life had other plans. One morning, my wife walked into the kitchen and said quietly, "Your mother called me last night." I looked up, surprised. "She did? Why?" "She said she didn't want to bother you, but she hasn't been feeling well." I froze for a second, then brushed it off. "She worries too much. She's probably fine." My wife didn't argue. She just looked at me for a long time and said, softly, "Maybe she just misses her son." That day at work, I couldn't focus. Her voice echoed in my mind. "She didn't want to bother you. Why did she think that? Had I really made her feel that way?" That evening, I called my mother. She sounded happy. Too happy, almost forced. "Son, it's so good to hear from you," she said, her voice trembling with warmth. "How are you feeling?" I asked. "Oh, just tired. Nothing serious." "Don't worry about me," I said. "If you're tired, go see a doctor." She laughed softly. "Doctors are expensive. And besides, I'm old. We get tired easily." I wanted to tell her I'd send money, but I didn't. Not because I couldn't, but because it felt like the only thing I ever offered anymore. Money instead of time. I hung up that night feeling unsettled. But once again, life swallowed the feeling whole. Months later, I got promoted. It was supposed to be one of the happiest moments of my life. My colleagues congratulated me. My wife brought home a cake, and we spent the evening celebrating. But somewhere inside, there was a small ache, a quiet thought whispering, "You should call her." She'd be so proud I didn't call. I told myself I'd tell her on the weekend. That weekend never came. A few days later, I got the call that changed everything. It was from a neighbor in my hometown, a kind man who used to help my mother with groceries. His voice was trembling. "Son, I'm sorry to tell you this, but your mother fainted last night. We took her to the hospital. She's stable now, but you should come." For a moment, I couldn't speak. It felt like the world had stopped. I told my wife, packed a small bag, and drove through the night. Every mile of that road felt heavier than the last. I kept thinking about all the times I'd ignored her calls, all the times she'd said she wasn't feeling well, and how easily I had brushed it off. When I reached the hospital, I saw her lying on the bed, smaller, frailer than I remembered. Her skin was pale, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to smile when she saw me. "Look at you," she whispered weakly. "You look tired. You must have driven all night." I wanted to tell her not to worry about me, that I was sorry, that I should have come sooner. But all I could manage was, "I'm fine, Mom. You should rest." She reached out, her hand cold but gentle, and touched my face. "I missed you," she said simply. Those words broke something in me. I stayed with her for a few days. The doctor said she was recovering but needed care. I took her home, made her meals, gave her medicine. She kept apologizing for being a burden. "I'll be strong soon," she'd say. "You shouldn't have to worry about me." And every time she said that, I felt a deeper kind of shame. Because for years she had worried about me when no one else did, and I had never once thanked her for it. After a week, I had to return to work. I promised I'd visit again soon. She smiled and said, "Don't worry about me. Just hearing your voice is enough." Before I left, she gave me a small box, one of those old wooden ones she used to keep her sewing threads in. "I've been keeping this for you," she said. "Open it when you're back home." I hugged her, kissed her forehead, and left. When I got home, I opened the box. Inside were small things, pieces of my childhood she'd kept all these years. My old school badge, a photo of my father holding me as a baby, a drawing I'd made when I was 7 with the words, "I love you, Mom. Written in crooked letters. Underneath all that was a folded letter. It said, "If you ever find this, it means I couldn't say these words in person. Don't feel guilty for living your life. I wanted that for you. Just remember, I never needed much. Just a call sometimes, just your voice. You were always my pride, even in silence." I sat there for hours holding that letter, tears streaming down my face. I didn't realize I was crying until my wife gently put her hand on my shoulder. "She loved you so much," she whispered. "I know," I said. And I never told her I loved her back. A few months later, she passed away in her sleep. Peacefully, they said. No pain, no struggle. Just quiet, like the way she lived. When I got the call, I didn't cry right away. I just sat there in silence. Then, slowly, the weight of every missed call, every unspoken word, every night she cried alone hit me all at once. I traveled back home again. This time not to visit, but to say goodbye. The house felt empty. Dust had gathered on the windowsills, the air heavy with the kind of stillness that makes you whisper without knowing why. Her sewing machine was still in the corner, her slippers beside the bed, her teacup still on the table, as if she'd be back any minute. I sat in her chair and closed my eyes. For the first time, I could almost hear her humming again, that soft, familiar tune from the mornings of my childhood. And that's when it happened. I cried. Not the kind of crying that comes from sadness alone, but the kind that comes from regret, the kind that empties you completely. I realized then why she used to cry at night. It wasn't weakness. It wasn't loneliness alone. It was love, unreturned, unnoticed, waiting quietly in the dark. She cried because she had given everything she had, and all she wanted was to be remembered. After her funeral, I stayed in that house for a few days. Every room held a memory. I found old letters she'd written but never sent. Simple things like reminders for my birthday, or notes about how proud she was when she heard I'd been promoted. She had written those words but never mailed them. Maybe she didn't want to seem needy. Maybe she just wanted to feel close to me by writing them. Each letter was a piece of her heart I had ignored without even knowing it. On the last night there, I walked through the garden. The same garden from that old picture. The flowers were still growing, though wild now. The sky was dark, quiet. And for the first time, I understood. I understood every tear she had shed in silence. Every night she stayed awake while the world slept. Every time she smiled through pain just to make sure I didn't see her breaking. I sat down on the same bench she once did and whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom." The words felt small compared to the years of silence. But somewhere deep inside, I hoped she could hear me, the boy who had finally grown up too late. That was the night I learned what loneliness truly means. It's not being alone in a room. It's being unseen by the ones you love the most. She must have felt that for years, and I made her feel that way. If I could go back, I'd give up every success, every moment of pride, just to have one more evening with her. One where I'd listen, really listen, and tell her how much she meant to me. But life doesn't rewind. It only teaches, and sometimes it teaches with loss. After my mother's funeral, I went back home, but something inside me had changed forever. It's strange how silence can follow you, even in the busiest streets, even when people are talking around you. It finds its way back. Quiet, steady, heavy. That silence became a part of me. At first, I tried to move on. I told myself she was at peace now, that feeling sad wouldn't bring her back. But grief isn't something you can reason with. It doesn't obey logic. It doesn't go away just because you want it to. It waits. In the pauses, in the moments between laughter, in the quiet hours of the night when everyone else is asleep. That's when it began. The same quiet crying I used to hear through her door when I was young. Now, it came from me. At first, it was just a single tear, then a soft sob I couldn't hold back. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, sit on the edge of my bed, and feel this ache that had no words. I didn't know then that I was reliving her nights, the same kind of loneliness she carried for years, waiting for a voice that never came. For months, I went through life like a shadow of myself. I'd go to work, smile when I needed to, talk when required. But inside I was elsewhere, back in that little house, listening to her hum, seeing her face light up when I walked through the door. I couldn't forgive myself. One evening, I found myself scrolling through old messages on my phone. There were dozens of missed calls from her number, calls I never answered. Each one felt like a wound reopening. I pressed play on one of her old voice notes. "Hi, son. It's me. I just wanted to say I love you. I hope you're eating well. The weather's been nice here. I planted a few new flowers. You should come see them someday." That word, someday. She said it so often, and I never noticed how much hope it carried. Now it was gone, and so was she. I must have listened to that message 50 times that night. It was the only way I could hear her voice again. Soft, kind, forgiving, even when I didn't deserve it. Around that time, I began noticing things differently. When people at work talked about their mothers, I'd fall silent. When I saw an older woman waiting for her son outside the school gates, my chest would tighten. Everywhere I looked, I saw reminders, not of what I lost, but of what I ignored. My wife tried to comfort me, but grief made me distant. "You're quiet these days," she said one night. I nodded. "I just miss her." She placed her hand over mine. "Then talk to her. Even if she's gone, she'll still hear you." That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I sat by the window, looked up at the sky and whispered, "Mom, I'm sorry." It felt strange at first, like speaking into nothing. But the more I spoke, the lighter my heart felt. I told her everything, how I regretted not calling, how I missed her stories, how I now understood that strength isn't silence. And somewhere in that quiet, I felt a small peace. Not forgiveness, or not yet, but the beginning of it. A few months later, something unexpected happened. My wife told me she was pregnant. For the first time in years, I felt joy again, the kind that comes with hope. I remember sitting there holding her hand, thinking, maybe this is how life heals you, by giving you someone new to love. When our daughter was born, I held her in my arms and felt something shift inside me. She was tiny, fragile, her eyes blinking softly as she looked up at me. And in that moment, I saw my mother. Not her face, but her love. That same gentle warmth, that same quiet strength. The first few nights after bringing her home were hard. The baby would cry at odd hours, and my wife would wake up to soothe her. One night, I told her to rest and took over. I walked around the room, rocking my daughter in my arms, whispering softly to her. She finally fell asleep, her little hand gripping my finger. And as I sat there holding her, a memory flashed in my mind. My mother doing the same for me. All those nights I'd cried as a child, and she stayed awake, humming, waiting for me to sleep. Tears filled my eyes. I whispered, "I get it now, Mom." That was the moment, the real turning point. Because it wasn't just sadness anymore, it was understanding. I realized love is made up of small, unseen sacrifices. The ones no one thanks you for, the ones you keep giving, even when it hurts. That's what she did all her life, and I had never seen it. As the years passed, I tried to live differently. I became more patient, more present. I started calling my mother's old friends, sending gifts to her neighbors, visiting her grave often. I'd sit there and talk to her, about my daughter, about life, about everything I wished I'd said when she was alive. My wife once asked me, "Do you think she hears you?" I smiled sadly. I think she always did. I started volunteering at a local community center for the elderly. At first, it was just to fill time, but soon it became something more. Every time I saw an old woman sitting alone, waiting for a visit that never came, it broke me. I'd sit with them, talk, listen to their stories, and every time one of them smiled, I saw my mother's face in theirs. It was as if life was giving me another chance, not to fix the past, but to honor it. One evening, as I was leaving the center, an old woman called out to me. "Son," she said, her voice weak but kind. "You remind me of my boy. He doesn't visit much." I smiled sadly. "Maybe he's busy, but he loves you, I'm sure," she nodded. "Maybe, but sometimes love isn't enough. You have to show it before time runs out." Her words echoed in my mind for days. You have to show it before time runs out. That night, I went home and hugged my daughter tighter than usual. She looked up, confused. "Why are you sad, Daddy?" she asked. "I'm not sad," I said softly. "I just love you very much." And as I said it, I thought of all the times my mother must have wanted to hear those same words. Years later, when my daughter grew older, she once found my mother's old wooden box. She brought it to me and asked, "Who kept these things?" I smiled, running my fingers over the worn edges. "Your grandmother. She loved keeping memories." She opened the lid, carefully taking out the photo of my mother and me. "She looks nice," she said. "She was," I whispered. "She was the kindest person I ever knew." She looked at me and asked, "Do you miss her?" I smiled gently. "Every single day." Then she said something that caught me off guard. "I think she'd be proud of you now." Her words hit me like sunlight breaking through clouds. Maybe she was right. Maybe my mother, wherever she was, could see me now. The man who finally understood her pain, her patience, her love. That night, I dreamt of her. She was sitting in that same garden, wearing her favorite blue shawl. She looked healthy, peaceful. When she saw me, she smiled and said, "You came back." I tried to speak, but my throat tightened. She stood, walked closer, and touched my face, just like she used to. Then she said softly, "You finally understand, don't you?" I nodded, tears in my eyes. "Yes, Mom, I do." She smiled, her eyes full of warmth. "Then don't cry anymore. Just love the way I loved, quietly, completely." And then she was gone. I woke up with tears on my face, but my heart felt lighter. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the heavy guilt pressing on my chest. I felt peace, the kind she always carried. After that, I began keeping a journal, letters to her. Every night before bed, I'd write about my day, my daughter, my regrets, my gratitude. It became my way of keeping her alive in my heart. Sometimes, when I reread those letters, I realize how much she still teaches me, through memories, through silence, through love that never really ended. I once read somewhere that we don't truly lose our loved ones. We carry them in the way we love others. That's what I try to do now. Every time I speak kindly to my daughter, every time I listen instead of argue, every time I say I love you without hesitation. That's her, living through me. People often say time heals everything, but that's not true. Time doesn't heal. It just teaches you how to live with the ache. What heals is understanding. And understanding came to me the moment I saw my reflection in her. The same late-night tears, the same quiet strength, the same kind of love that asks for nothing but to be seen. That's when I realized I never really lost her. She just became a part of who I am. The older I get, the more I realize that life isn't about big moments. It's about small ones, the quiet mornings, the soft goodbyes, the unspoken words that stay with you. For so long, I chased the idea of success, of being someone, without noticing the faces that waited for me at home. Now, I understand. Home isn't a place. It's a heart, and I lost mine for a while. The years passed gently. My daughter grew up, her laughter filling every corner of our home, the same way mine once filled my mother's. Sometimes when she laughed, I'd close my eyes and hear my mother's voice hidden somewhere in that sound. It made me smile. I started teaching my daughter about kindness, not with words, but through the way I lived. We'd visit the elderly together, bring them flowers, listen to their stories. One day, she asked me, "Daddy, why do we do this so often?" I smiled and said, "Because once I forgot to. And I don't ever want you to forget." She didn't fully understand then, but she will one day. just like I did. I still visit my mother's grave every few weeks. I bring her favorite flowers, white lilies. I sit there quietly, brushing away the leaves that fall over her name. Sometimes I talk to her. Sometimes I just sit in silence. The world around me keeps moving. Cars passing, people walking, children laughing. But in that small space, time stands still. It feels like she's there, sitting beside me, humming softly like she used to when I was little. I tell her about my daughter's school, about work, about how my wife still makes tea the way she did, strong and sweet. And even though she doesn't answer, I feel her warmth in the breeze that passes by. One afternoon, after visiting her, I went back home and found my daughter drawing. She had drawn a picture of a woman in a garden surrounded by flowers. When I asked who it was, she said, "It's Grandma." "You said she loved flowers." I smiled, my throat tightening. "Yes," I said softly. "She really did." She added, "I think she's happy in heaven." And in that moment, I felt something lift inside me, a peace I had never known before. Maybe that's what healing looks like. Not forgetting, but remembering differently. Not with guilt, but with love. Over time, I stopped writing letters to her every night, not because I forgot, but because I didn't need to anymore. Her lessons had become a part of me. When my daughter made mistakes, I didn't scold her harshly. I'd take a breath, sit beside her, and talk gently, just like my mother would have done. Sometimes I'd catch myself saying things she used to say, and I'd smile. Be kind even when it's hard. Speak softly. Anger only builds walls. People remember how you made them feel, not what you said. Those words stayed with me, and now they live through me. One evening, my wife found me sitting on the porch, lost in thought. She sat beside me and asked, "You were thinking about her again, weren't you?" I nodded. "I always do," she smiled softly. "You've changed since she passed. You're gentler now." I looked out at the setting sun and said, "She taught me love, even in her absence." We sat there in silence, watching the sky turn gold and pink. And for the first time in years, I felt completely at peace. Sometimes, late at night, I still wake up and think I hear her voice. Maybe it's just my heart remembering. Maybe love never truly leaves. It just changes form. There's a certain beauty in loss. It teaches you what truly matters. It reminds you that nothing, not time, not distance, not death, can erase love that was real. I used to think forgiveness was something you had to earn. Now I know. Sometimes it's a gift that comes quietly, without words. And maybe, just maybe, my mother forgave me long before I even knew I needed forgiveness. When my daughter turned 10, she asked if we could visit Grandma's garden, the one I always talked about. We drove out there one weekend. The house had new owners, but the garden still looked the same. The roses were blooming, the lilies shining white under the sun. I stood there for a long time, remembering her hands gently tending to those flowers. My daughter ran around laughing, touching every petal. Then she picked one small flower and handed it to me. "Let's take this to Grandma's place," she said. So we did. We went to her grave and placed it there, a tiny white flower, glowing under the soft light. I whispered, "She's growing up kind, Mom, just like you would have wanted." And I could almost hear her voice in the wind, gentle, forgiving, proud. As I stood there, I realized something profound. All those years I spent chasing achievements, trying to prove myself, they meant nothing compared to this moment. This, standing beside my daughter, remembering my mother, this was what life was. This, standing beside my daughter, remembering my mother, this was what life was. Love that survives mistakes. Love that forgives without being asked. Love that keeps blooming, even after everything else fades. Years later, when my daughter left for college, She hugged me tight and said, "Don't worry." "Dad, I'll call you every day." I laughed softly. "I'll hold you to that." As she drove away, I felt the same ache my mother must have felt when I left her all those years ago. But this time, I didn't let the silence grow between us. Every evening, I'd get a message from her, a photo, a call, a little voice note saying, "Hi, Dad. I love you." Each time I heard it, I felt peace, because I knew I had broken the cycle. I had learned what my mother had tried to teach me all along, that love must be shown, not stored away. As I grow older, I find myself talking to her more often again, not from grief, but from gratitude. When I see kindness in my daughter, I thank her. When I feel patience in myself, I thank her. When I sit in silence and feel peace instead of pain, I know she's still with me. Sometimes I whisper into the quiet air, "I love you, Mom." And somewhere deep inside, I feel her whisper back, "I know." I've learned that love doesn't end with goodbye. It lingers in the people we touch, the lessons we pass on, the hearts we help heal. And maybe that's how we live forever, not through what we achieve, but through what we give. If I could go back, I'd tell my younger self just one thing: call her, visit her, tell her you love her now, not later, because later might never come. So if you're listening to this story right now, if you still have someone waiting for your voice, your message, your visit, don't wait. Don't assume they know. Tell them. Say it simply, "I love you. Thank you for everything." Because sometimes that's all a heart needs to hear to feel at peace. As I end this story, I imagine my mother sitting in her garden once more, smiling, her hands resting on her lap, her eyes full of warmth. The flowers sway around her, and the sunlight touches her face. In that image, she's not alone anymore, because in every heartbeat, in every act of love, she lives on. And maybe that's what life is really about, learning. Too late or just in time, that love was always the answer.